703 Hutchins,
What zone is that in?
Zone 3.
And how far would that be from the location of Cleveland Avenue and Old Hateville Road in Atlanta?
I really can't tell you how far that would be.
All right. Mr. Bean, when we spoke at your job the last time that we met, or the first time that we met, did you want to speak with me?
No, ma'am.
And did you want to come in here and testify today?
No, ma'am.
I'll rule the objection, Mr. Sharp.
And did you come only because you were given a subpoena?
I sustain the objection. Yes, it was.
And Your Honor, respectfully, with the yes or no question, I did not suggest an answer.
It's leading.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
If you had not received a subpoena, would you be here today?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Bean, do you drive?
Do I drive
Yes, sir.
a car?
Do you drive at all? Are you able to drive a vehicle?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
All right. Did you have a vehicle in 2013?
Not in my name.
No matter whose name it was in, did you have access to one?
I don't remember.
I'm going to take your attention back to September 11th of 2013. Do you recall that date?
In 2013, I don't really recall nothing that happened in 2013.
Well, let me ask you a more specific question. Do you recall ever crashing a vehicle into a coin laundry at Cleveland Avenue in Old Hateville?
I really don't remember.
I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as JW exhibit number 80 as an 80, and ask you if you recognize it is. And if you could, with the assistance of Mr. Oklahoma, for the moment is, I'm going to show 81 as well. So since there he was, I'll just have to. And as soon as counsel for the defendants have an opportunity to look at these, I'm going to bring them up to you. They've already been viewed as evidence. No, they are exhibits that have already been viewed as evidence. I may not use all of them. I'm sure you can find them. Showing you defendant's exhibit number 80. This picture has already been admitted as evidence. Would you tell the jury if you recognize the items shown in this picture?
Can I say something?
You
Or does it got to pertain to this?
Huh?
Can I say something?
Okay. After you answer the question, which you have to do,
Because I don't remember nothing that happened in 2013. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
I understand. What I have to do is ask you some questions and determine what you do and don't remember. So, what is your response as to whether or not you recognize the images shown in Defendant's Exhibit number 80?
I don't remember.
All right. And I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit number 81. Do you recognize what's shown there?
No, ma'am.
All right. What about number 101 for Defendant Exhibits?
You see a car, but I don't remember it.
Okay, that's fine. Is your answer the same for defendant's exhibit number 82, number 89, and defendant's exhibit 90?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, Mr. B, approximately what time of the year was it, or when was it that you first met me on your job? Do you remember?
I just met you this year.
So it's in 2024 that you met me for the first time?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And did you meet anyone else from the district attorney's office in the last 2 years besides myself?
I haven't had a chance to talk. I haven't talked to nobody, met anybody, or anything. I've been working, minding my business, and that's all I've been doing.
Thank you. And do you recognize any persons that are seated at either the table I'm pointing at here or the table behind us here? Do you recognize either of these four individuals?
No, ma'am.
Looking around the courtroom, do you recognize anyone else anyone inside the courtroom?
No, ma'am.
Do you know a person by the name of Jeffrey Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you know two people by the name of Jeffrey Williams? Do you know a person named Jeffrey Williams that is also called Young Thug?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you known him?
I don't know him like that. I know him just because of rapper.
I'm sorry. Say
I don't know him like that.
You know him just what?
Musical,
Music.
through music.
Okay. Is it your testimony that you have no personal knowledge of Jeffrey Williams, known as Young Thug?
My personal dealings with. I don't know him. Like we don't grow up together.
Okay.
We don't hang together.
When you say, I don't know him like that, but you know him, would you explain to the jury how you know him?
Music, listening to music.
Bless you.
And have you ever had any,
Heard of his music.
you've only heard of his music, is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. In 2013, did you know Jeffrey Williams Jr.?
I really don't have any knowledge about 2013, ma'am. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. That I don't really have any knowledge about 2013. Once I have went to prison and came home from prison and done my time, everything that happened in 2013 or whatever has been put behind me and set forth. So I've been, working and just doing my thing since I came home from prison. I don't have no knowledge of nothing that happened 10 years ago.
When did you go to prison?
I think it's around 2015, something like that.
2015?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you went to prison,
And I came home 2017.
the incident that you went to prison for, what year did that incident take place?
I can't recall.
Do you recall the sentence that you got?
I don't remember.
Are you still under that sentence?
I don't remember.
Do you recall getting hit by a car on September 11th of 2013?
So due to the lack of things that I was doing back in the days, I don't really have no knowledge of nothing. I put everything behind me from back then, and I just left everything. I've been kind of blacked out ever since then about everything that went on with me in my life back then.
Okay. And what things are you talking about, Mr. Beamer?
I had suffered from Molly. I don't know if y'all familiar with that.
You said you suffered from Molly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if anybody in the courtroom is familiar with that, but I took a lot of drugs back in the day, and it said maybe a lot of things went wrong with me and my family. So I kind of like, since I straightened my life out, after coming home from prison, everything had just been white blank. I ain't remembering nothing that went on back then or nothing that had anything going on with anybody else. It's just been just me and my life and trying to just stay successful and free and just keep living the way I've been living in this city of Atlanta.
Thank you. Now, how long have you been clean? And congratulations on being clean.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
I'm over the objection, Mr. Matthews.
Been clean out for quite some time, 3-4 years now.
Congratulations. And when you said that you were on drugs, how long were you on drugs?
I abused them.
How long did you abuse drugs? From what year to what year?
I can't recall.
Where did you get your drugs from?
I can't recall.
I'm over the objection, Mr. Matthews.
When I asked you earlier if you recognize anyone in the courtroom besides me, would you tell the jury if you see the person that you called Jeffrey Williams, known as Young Thug, in the courtroom? Look around the entire courtroom.
Yes, ma'am.
Where is he located?
I mean, it's over on that side right there.
Would you describe what he's wearing so that the record properly reflects who you're talking about?
I mean, right there, suit, black tie.
And is he seated between a young lady in a yellow dress and a young man in a blue suit?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, would the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant, Jeffrey Williams?
It shall.
Thank you. Were you familiar with Jeffrey Williams on September 11th of 2013?
I can't recall.
When did you first meet Jeffrey Williams?
I can't recall.
You said that you knew
I only know Jeffrey Williams through making music now.
Okay.
Rapper. And being in the neighborhood, like surrounding neighborhood, Cleveland Avenue, but I don't know him like personally. Me and him has no dealings. I don't hang with Jeffrey Williams. I'm not a member of YSL. I'm not nothing, I don't have no parts of anything that's going on with nothing that I can recall of.
What did you call Jeffrey Williams?
Ma'am?
What did you call Jeffrey Williams? You said you knew him by his music. What did you call him back in 2013?
The songs he had.
Assumes facts that are not in evidence.
I'm over the objection, Mr. Matthews.
I never really called him anything.
When you referred to him, did you use a particular name?
No, ma'am.
If you know him by his music, what is the name that you know him by his music?
The music? Young Thug.
Young Thug, okay. And since you do know his music, what was the earliest music of his that you are familiar with?
I can't recall.
Are you familiar with a release of his came from nothing?
No, ma'am.
When you said or CFN, are you familiar with a release of his by that name?
No, ma'am.
You said that you were familiar with him through what parts of Atlanta did you name?
Music. Cleveland Avenue.
Okay. Did you live on Cleveland Avenue at any time in your life?
No, ma'am.
So what was it that took you to Cleveland Avenue that allowed you to see Young Thug?
I lived off Cleveland Avenue, and I never
Hold on.
seen.
Oh, hold on. Mr. Bean, when there's an objection, you got to just stop talking, okay?
Oh, yes, sir.
And then let me rule upon it, and then we'll let you know whether or not you can answer the question. I'm going to overrule the objection.
I object to it on the basis that it assumes facts that are not in evidence.
All right, and I'm going to overrule the objection. All right, you may answer the question, sir, okay?
So that it is exactly right, Your Honor, may I ask that the court reporter read the exact question that was asked?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. B, just listen to the court report.
So what was it that took you to Cleveland Avenue that allowed you to see Young Thug?
I never went to Cleveland Avenue to see Young Thug.
So when you speak of knowing,
I never lived on Cleveland Avenue. I lived off in the neighborhood of Cleveland. I never stayed on Cleveland Avenue, period.
how far from Cleveland Avenue did you live?
Hutchins Road,
How far was that?
703 Hutchins.
How far was that from Cleveland Avenue?
I don't know distance. I can't recall the distance of how far this is and that. But it's in the neighborhood. It's not on Cleveland Avenue.
And when you said you knew Young Thug from Cleveland Avenue and the neighborhood and the community, what did you mean by that?
I said I knew him from Cleveland Avenue. In the neighborhood.
Okay. what
I
did
said
you
I
mean
know.
by that?
I said I know him about his music. I never said I know him on Cleveland Avenue. And what's the name, did I? But I said I knew him by his music.
Okay. So
He's a rapper. That was my statement.
okay. So when you first mentioned Cleveland Avenue, do you recall what it was that you told the jury?
You said one more time?
When you first mentioned Cleveland Avenue today, just a second ago, do you recall what it was you first told the jury?
I didn't recall. I don't remember anything from like 2013, and that I really don't have no knowledge of.
What about 2011?
I don't remember.
Do you know what kind of car Young Thug drove back in 2013?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Have you ever been hit by a car?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times?
I've been in several accidents.
Has your body physically, while outside of a car, been hit by another car?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times?
Once.
What happened in that time?
I really don't remember
How do you remember?
everything that happened.
Okay, you don't have to remember everything. Just
Well-
tell the jury what you do remember.
I don't remember.
How do you remember then that you got hit by a car while outside of the vehicle?
He says I hit several times in an accident, ma'am.
Right. Do you recall that you just told the jury that you've only been hit by a car while outside a vehicle one time? Do you recall telling the jury that just a few seconds ago?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So how are you able to remember that one time?
I really don't.
Why did you say it then?
I don't know. I'm really just so many stuff. Y'all rushing me in here so fast and start throwing stuff at me and stuff like that. And I'm trying to tell you, like 2013 and whatever happened to me in the past, since I did my time, I kind of wiped everything clean to me. So I don't recall none of it.
When you got hit by that car, was that on September 11th of 2013?
I don't remember. The date I got hit, I don't remember.
Do you remember if it was in 2013?
No, ma'am, I don't remember.
Do you remember if you went to jail after that?
I really don't remember.
Do you know how many times that you have gone to jail following being hit by a car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall being hit by a police car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall getting a big old bump on your head after being hit by a police car?
I really don't recall, ma'am.
Have you ever been arrested in Fulton County and taken to Rice Street?
I've been to Rice Street a couple of times.
And while you are in Rice Street, obviously you're not in there now, so are you able to get bonded out, or do you remain there until a trial?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Have you ever posted bond to get out of Rice Street, or had someone post it for you?
I done made bail to get out of jail on Rice Street. Yes, ma'am.
Who, during the times that you've gotten out of jail, who was it that paid your bail?
I can't really remember who paid the bond.
Were you married to your wife in September of 2013?
Me and my wife been married for a while now, for years now, since 2007.
Since 2007?
I think 7 to 2007.
I hope she's not watching this and hear you not remember when you all got married. But you all have been together for a while, that's safe to say.
27 years now.
Congratulations. Would your wife sometimes bail you out of jail when you were arrested and placed in Rice Street?
Yes.
And did you, while you were in Rice Street, were you have or given the opportunity to call your wife? Did you call your wife while you were in Rice Street?
I don't remember.
You don't recall whether at any time you called your wife after you were arrested?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Foundation.
I'll allow it.
You don't recall whether you called your wife after you were arrested at any time in Rice Street?
Objection, Your
Honor,
Honor,
that's
that's an answer.
I stand the objection.
Do you recall telephoning your wife in September, specifically September 11th or September 12th, 2013, after you had been placed in Rice Street?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telephoning your wife at all from a jail during that time?
No, ma'am.
You stated that you did not recall or you did not recognize or couldn't remember the exhibits or the items that were reflected in defendant's exhibits number 80 and 81. Do you recall saying that?
I don't remember. You have to show it on, so I don't remember.
Mr. Kokomo or Mr. Steele, may I get you to please place on the screen defendant's exhibit number 80?
Was those that car you showed?
You remember what it was? I'll let him place it on the screen. Would you zoom in, please? Are you all able to zoom in a little bit more on the red car? Thank you. Perfect. All right. That red car that you're looking at over your left shoulder.
It's been the same one that
I'm sorry.
I don't remember that.
Okay. Do you remember ever being in that car?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember ever driving that car?
I don't remember, ma'am.
On September the 11th of 2013, do you remember being at, or let me ask you before I go there, do you know the area of Summerdale Apartments off of Old Hateville Road in Cleveland Avenue in Atlanta?
I don't remember.
You don't remember whether you know the apartment?
No, ma'am.
As you sit here now, have you ever heard of Summerdale Commons?
No, ma'am.
Let me show you a few more images. How familiar are you with the area of Old Hateville Road and Cleveland Avenue in Atlanta?
Not that familiar with Old Hateville and Cleveland Avenue.
Are you familiar with the Coin Laundry at that location?
No, ma'am.
Are you familiar with a Profile Institute of Barber Styling at that location? Or nearby?
No, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the McDonald's that was at that location in 2013?
No, ma'am.
Are you familiar with a BP gas station that was at that location in 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember in 2013 talking to a detective, David Quinn?
I don't recall.
Do you recall being involved in an incident with Walter Murphy on September 11th of 2013?
I don't really remember.
Do you know who Walter Murphy is?
No, ma'am.
Do you know a person that you call DK?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever heard of a person
I never called nobody named DK.
Have you ever heard of a person called? You said you never called anyone.
I never just mentioned nobody named DK.
My question to you though is, have you ever heard of a person called DK?
No, ma'am. You asked me, did I call somebody named DK?
No, I asked you if you've ever heard of a person named or called DK. Have you personally ever heard of a person who goes by DK?
No, ma'am.
Now, back in 2013, September 11, 2013, how old would you have been?
I don't really remember.
Tell the jury what your birthday is.
1979,
What is the month and day?
6/22/79.
All right. Do you recall ever being in a vehicle with Young Thug on September 11th of 2013?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Do you recall being in that same vehicle or a vehicle with Walter Murphy and Young Thug on September 11th, 2013?
I really don't recall, ma'am.
Do you recall speaking with Detective David Quinn about your time in a vehicle with Walter Murphy and Young Thug on September 11, 2013?
Ma'am, I don't recall nothing that happened in 2013.
All right. Do you know who Frederick Prothrow is?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever heard of a person goes by the name Big Fred?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever called anyone Big Fred?
I don't remember.
Do you know a person that you have ever called Big Nick?
I don't remember. No, ma'am.
Do you know whether you know anyone named Big Nick?
No, ma'am.
No, you don't know anyone by that name?
I don't know a Big Nick.
Do you know anyone by the name of Frederick Prothrow?
No, ma'am.
Do you know anyone that you call Big Fred?
I just answered that.
Do you know anyone that you call Skateboard?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever met a person called Skateboard?
No, ma'am.
Do you know a person by the name of Brian Ransom?
No, ma'am.
In 2013, were you at all acquainted with a person by the name of Brian Ransom?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn in 2013 that you have a friend named Skateboard?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you had known Skateboard for about 2 years as of September 11, 2013?
I don't recall that conversation, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that, in fact, you borrowed the vehicle depicted in Defendant's Exhibit 80 from a friend of Skateboard's?
I don't recall, ma'am.
As you sit here today, do you recall borrowing the vehicle that is shown in Defendant's 80?
No, ma'am, I don't recall.
Do you recall driving the vehicle that is depicted in Defendant's 80?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall flying or driving the vehicle depicted in Defendant's 80 while a person named Big Fred, DK, and Thug were in that same vehicle?
I don't remember.
Can you think of a time that you might have driven that vehicle
No, ma'am.
while DK, Big Fred, and Thug were in the vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Objection calls for speculation.
I sustain the objection.
Do you recall speaking with Detective David Quinn on September 16th of 2013?
No, ma'am, I don't recall.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn coming to the jail to pick you up around that time? To pick you up from Rice Street?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall riding in a vehicle with the Detective David Quinn around that time?
No, ma'am, I don't remember.
Do you know a Detective David Quinn?
No, ma'am.
To the best of your knowledge, have you ever met Detective David Quinn?
I can't recall.
Do you know any detectives from the Atlanta Police Department as you sit here today?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
I sustain the objection.
As you sit here today, do you recall meeting on September 11th of 2013 any detectives from the Atlanta Police Department?
No, ma'am.
Did you drive did you drive any vehicle at all on September 11th of 2013?
I can't recall, ma'am.
Do you recall ever being inside a Taurus with Detective David Quinn that he described as a raggedy-ass Taurus?
Objection, hearsay.
I sustain the objection.
Do you recall being in a raggedy-ass Taurus with Detective David Quinn around September 16, 2013?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Would you consider yourself a family man?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn on or around September 16, 2013, that you are a family man?
I don't remember any conversation that me and Detective Quinn supposedly have had, ma'am. I don't recall even speaking with Detective Quinn, period.
Okay. And I appreciate
can't
it and
remember.
understand, but I do have to ask you, just to establish for this jury what you do and don't remember. So I have to ask you these questions, okay? Can you bear with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Do you recall riding with Detective David Quinn to an Atlanta Police Headquarters building?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall speaking with Detective Quinn in an interview room at the Atlanta Police Department?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall being read your rights by a Detective David Quinn on or about September 16, 2013?
No, ma'am.
And when I say read your rights, do you understand what I'm talking about?
No, ma'am.
When you were arrested during the times that you said you went to jail, were you read rights that entailed you have the right to remain silent?
I don't remember.
Do you recall talking to Detective David Quinn about the location shown in State's Exhibit 156 Charlie on Macon Drive?
I don't recall any conversations that I've had with Detective Quinn.
Do you recall whether that location that I showed you in State's Exhibit 156 Charlie was an after-hour spot that either you or your wife visited back in 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall, or did you know that your wife went to that location?
Basis. I stand the objection.
Are you aware if your wife went to that location in 2013?
I stand the objection.
Do you know, or have you and your wife ever visited 2233 Macon Drive in Atlanta?
I can't recall, ma'am.
Have you and or your wife ever visited the location depicted in States 156 Charlie?
I can't recall, no, ma'am.
All right. Do you know whether the house depicted in 156 Charlie is in Zone 3 in Atlanta?
I don't know what side. I ain't real good with the sides because they switch up.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'm not real good with the zones because they switch up.
Do you know the area of Atlanta that would have been Zone 3 in 2013?
Not the full area of Zone 3.
Back in 2013, specifically on or about September 16, 2013, did you have a dope record?
I don't remember, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn on September 16, 2013, that you have a dope record, but that you were through with drugs?
Basis. I'll stand the objection.
Do you recall talking to Detective David Quinn about your struggle with drugs?
I don't remember.
I'll rule the objection.
You may answer for the jury.
I don't remember any conversations that I've had with a Detective Quinn.
Do you remember Detective Quinn telling you that anytime he deals with someone,
Your Honor, you're safe.
I stand the objection.
Your Honor, I'm establishing a foundation.
I still don't sustain the objection.
I am orienting the witness.
Still sustain the objection. You can rephrase it though.
Have you at any time ever been told by Detective Quinn or been taken out of a facility by Detective David Quinn?
No, ma'am, I don't remember.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn on September 16, 2013, that you had gone as far as the 11th grade in school?
No, ma'am.
By that time, by September 11th of 2013, had you gotten to the 11th grade?
I don't remember. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Now, at this time today, can you read and write?
Yes, ma'am.
And on September 16, 2013, could you read and write?
I don't remember, ma'am. I can read and write, though.
Say that for me again.
I can read and write.
Has Detective David Quinn ever told you, said to you the words, "You have the right to remain
Your
silent"?
Honor, that's going to be hearsay.
I sustain the objection.
It would be offered and asked, Your Honor, for
Well,
its
it's been
effect
asked
on
and
the listener.
it's been asked and answered already though.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Have you ever been told by Detective David Quinn that you have the right to consult with an attorney?
Again, Your Honor, same objection.
I'm gonna rule that one.
No, ma'am.
Have you ever been told by Detective David Quinn that you have a right to have an attorney present with you during any questioning?
No, ma'am.
Are you saying to the jury you don't recall or that that never happened?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you recall whether Detective David Quinn would have told you on or about September 16, 2013, that if you could not afford an attorney, one would be provided to you at no cost?
I don't remember any conversations that I have had with a Detective Quinn.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn about being in the back of a police car on September the 11th, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall whether Detective Quinn ever said to you that I don't have any charges on you, but I'm investigating a case?
Basis or hearsay?
Yes, Your Honor.
What's your response, panel?
Effect on the listener.
I will rule the objection.
No, ma'am.
Is your no meaning to suggest or testify that it never happened or that you don't remember?
I don't remember any conversation that I have had with a Detective Quinn, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn telling you that he was investigating a case where an officer shot his weapon?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn back in 2013 telling you about meeting your wife?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you have 2 sons and a daughter?
No, ma'am. I don't remember.
Did you have 3 children on September 11th, 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
Were they around the ages of 17, 12, and 10 on September 11th of 2013?
I don't remember how old they really was around 213. This is 13. Let's see. I have to add it up. No,
Go ahead.
I don't remember.
Did you live over on the west side of Atlanta in September of 2013?
I don't remember.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you lived on the west side of Atlanta?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn in September 2013 that at that time you lived off of Cleveland Avenue in Atlanta?
I don't remember any conversation that I have had with a Detective Quinn.
Do you recall telling any police detective in September 2013?
Or any other officer, ma'am.
Now, do you know, or did you know in 2013, Keith Meadows?
You said who?
Keith Meadows.
What he's got to do with anything?
Sir, I have to ask you the questions, and I have to exact from you the answers. So can you please tell the jury?
2013, no, ma'am.
No, I'm asking you, do you know a Keith Meadows?
Yes, ma'am. I know Keith Meadows.
And in 2013, what kind of work did Keith Meadows do?
I don't remember.
Was he a major Keith Meadows back then?
I don't remember.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn about the unfortunate occasion of a cousin of yours having been killed?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn in that conversation about your cousin that Keith Meadows at that time was a chief now?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall talking with Detective David Quinn or anyone from the Atlanta Police Department about going to get some codeine lean to drink on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall talking to someone from the Atlanta Police Department in September 2013 about how you went up the street on September 11th to holler at a dude?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling a police detective, in particular David Quinn, in September 2013, that the dude hopped out the car and fired shots?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that everything happened so quick at one time as it relates to that dude firing shots?
I don't recall having any conversations with the Detective Quinn.
Do you recall telling any police detective that information in September 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn or any police detective in September 2013 playing calls for you that you made to your wife while you were at Rice Street?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn speaking to you regarding your being the driver of the red car in State's Exhibit 156 Charlie?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall looking at a photograph of Young Thug while you spoke to Detective David Quinn or any other police detective in September of 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall pointing out Young Thug in that photograph as the person you were referring to as Jeffrey Williams?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling any police detective that Jeffrey Williams or Young Thug, DK, and Big Fred were in a car with you at the time that a shooting occurred?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn or any other police department in September 2013 offering you drinks or water or soda or something during a time that you were interviewed by them?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall asking for an orange soda?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn or anyone else in September 2013 about a guy that you knew named Brian?
No, ma'am.
And did you recall telling Detective Quinn or anyone else at the Atlanta Police Department that a Mexican kid came with a person named Brian a couple of times during 2013 to see you?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn or anyone else with the Atlanta Police Department asking you at Atlanta Police Headquarters to tell them about September 11, 2013 and how you ended up with the car shown in State's 156 Charlie?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall talking to Detective David Quinn or anyone else with the Atlanta Police Department about how you ended up all skinned up the way you were at that time?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that on September 11, 2013, you pulled up at your spot?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling him that your spot was on Macon Drive?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that he probably saw a black Camry at your spot?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling him that you couldn't remember the address of the spot because you had two spots?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn or any other detective with APD that one of the spots that's across the street would be 2246 Macon, and that you think the other one is 2323 Macon?
I don't recall having any conversations with a Detective Quinn.
Do you recall having any knowledge that your wife met any police detective at 2233 Macon Drive in Atlanta on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anybody with the Atlanta Police Department that you pulled in at 2233 Macon Drive on September the 11th, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone that after you pulled in, you parked?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone at APD in September 2013 that 15, 20, or 30 minutes after you parked, Brian pull up?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone that Brian called you and said he needed to holler at you about something?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone at APD that Brian then pulled up?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall mentioning at that point this guy, Young Thug?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone at APD that you and Brian just shot the shit for a minute?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn or anyone else that you asked Brian to come chop it up with you, and the guy, Young Thug, rolled up and said, "Hey man, I just seen a dude with about $33,000 on him." You know what I'm saying?
No, ma'am.
Basis.
Improper refreshing of recollection.
I am not refreshing recollection, Your Honor.
I'll rule the objection, sir.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn asking you, who are you talking about? Who's Young Thug?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn asking you, wait a minute, who is it that you said told you about seeing a dude with $22,000 or $33,000 on him?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn
Question.
again, more than once, that's what Young Thug said?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn asking you, is he the kid with the dreadlocks that you be always hanging out with at McDonald's?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn on September 16th or September 17th, 2013, that Young Thug, he's a rapper? He's a rapper.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn asking you whether this person you were calling Young Thug was real skinny?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective David Quinn asking you whether this person you call Young Thug wore his pants like, in his words, white boys and shit?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn, yep, that's him, that's him?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that Young Thug was screaming that he saw a guy with some money or whatever?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn so that you, Big Fred, and you all with Young Thug and DK go in Brian's car to see about that situation?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn or anyone about the guy with the D and the K in his face?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that the guy with the D of the money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that after they went and checked on that money, they found out that nothing was going on with that situation?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that after you all determined that nothing was going on with that situation, you, DK, or the person with the D and the K on his face, Big Fred and Young Thug, were all going in on some lean?
No, ma'am.
Do you know what lean is?
No, ma'am.
You don't know what lean is?
No, ma'am.
I stand the objection.
Have you ever referred to anything as lean?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever taken or drank lean?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you all went to get some lean?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you got it from your buddy up there in Summerdale?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn or anyone else that Big Fred had just gotten home from prison?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling him that you had $50, but that Big Fred had nothing?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying that he don't know nothing about nothing, he just coming home from the chain gang to Detective Quinn?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that Thug and DK got in the back of the car you were in?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you were driving the car that is depicted in State's Exhibit 156 chart?
No, ma'am. I don't recall any conversation that I've had with a Detective Quinn.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or anyone else, any detective?
No, ma'am. Any detectives.
Okay, I gotta finish the question, okay? Just so that the record
Okay,
reflects.
yes, ma'am.
All right.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
It's okay.
That you all gave DK money to go get some lean.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or anyone else that DK went around the corner and started firing some shots or something?
No.
Shots just go off.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or anyone else that when he got back, you were looking at DK like, what the hell is going on?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone at APD that you asked DK, what the fuck you shooting for? What you shooting at?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone at APD that DK got in the car and said, go, go, go?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall seeing a Taurus in Summerdale Apartments on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that the Taurus pulled up and that when you pulled out, you tried to go around the car?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn at first that it was a black Taurus, but then correcting it and saying blue?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you if the Taurus that you saw was like the one Detective Quinn picked you up?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that as the Taurus pulled up, the person in the Taurus was trying to see what was going on, and you were trying to see what was going on?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that you had backed the car depicted in State's 156 Charlie into a parking space?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall describing for Detective Quinn or anyone else how the Taurus approached as you were back in?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that the Taurus was about 2 car lengths up from you at the time that you saw it?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that as you pulled out, cops were right there with a gun?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or anyone else that as you go around, you see the cop car hit you?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Quinn or anyone else that the car bumped the tail of the car you were in?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that as you went out, the cops shot?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that after the cop fired a shot, you went around, boom, and hit the gate?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn or anyone else that you went straight across, jumped on the wall, boom, hit the other wall, boom, run into the laundromat?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you if you saw a police car down there at the bottom of the wall at the laundromat?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you didn't see a police car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you whether you were driving the car that almost landed on the police car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying in response to such a question, yes, sir?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or anyone else, I lied to the detectives when they first came?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you lied to the detectives when they first came to talk to you and you told them that Big Fred was driving when actually you were the driver?
I don't recall any conversation I had with the Detective Quinn.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that Big Fred was in fact the passenger, that DK was behind you, and Young Thug was behind Big Fred?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you whether Big Fred was like 6'8" and 354 pounds?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you if Big Fred was sitting in the back seat?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling him, no, he's in the front seat with me?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you questions to make sure he got who was situated where in the car correct?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn one thing earlier in the interview or in a conversation with him and then another later on?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, yeah, I told a few bullshit lies, but I'm not going to keep on shitting with you?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn, I'm just going to keep it all the way live, man?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, everything just happened so fast that none of this was even supposed to occur?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective David Quinn that your man had just come home from prison?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you about the guy with the money and whether Thug came to you with what sounded to him like a lick?
No, ma'am.
What do you understand a lick to be if we're talking about coming to you with a lick?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Have you heard the term lick used for robbery?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn the lick was dead, I guess?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that on September 11, 2013, you had $345 of your own?
No, ma'am.
Do you know whether $345 was taken from you and put into Atlanta Police Department property?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you had your own money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Quinn that you had that money in cash in your pocket?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Quinn that that money had nothing to do with what was going on up in Summerdale?
No, ma'am.
Miss, before you pause another question, can I get you and defense representative come on up here, please?
Yes,
All right, thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that at least somebody wants to take a break. Okay, I have it on good authority. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and do this. Since it's close to lunch, let's take your comfort break. We'll go ahead and just have lunch, and let's just plan on coming back for 1 o'clock, and then the plan for the afternoon is we'll take about another hour for the testimony, and that'll be today. We'll be complete, okay? All right, so we'll see you back for 1 o'clock. Mr. Bean, you'll be excused until 1. Okay, make sure you come back a little bit before 1 because we'll need you as well. And don't discuss testimony with anybody except the attorneys in this case, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, you can leave, sir. All right, all rise. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you may be excused for lunch. We'll see you back at 1 o'clock, okay? All right, we're in recess. All right, thank you. All right. Summon our jurors, please, first, sir. Mr. Bean, Mr. Bean.
I'm so sorry.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. All right, thank you, Sergeant Ingram. All right, Ms. Love, you can continue with the examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Bean, you doing okay?
Yes, ma'am. Can y'all hear me? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, and good job. Mr. Bean, I'm gonna pick up with where we left off right before lunch, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, sir. Do you recall in September of 2013, telling either Detective Quinn or another police detective at the Atlanta Police Headquarters, that you did not have a gun in the car on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling either Detective Quinn or another detective that you shot no guns on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn or another detective asking you on or about September 16, 2013, who had pistols in that car?
Objection, Your Honor.
Basis. Mr. Matthews, was you hearsay?
Yes, sir.
Effect on the listener.
Overruled.
No, ma'am. Oh.
Do you remember the question I just asked?
Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am.
All right. You don't recall that.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling a detective with the Atlanta Police Department in an interview, you got Big Fred with a gun? Do you recall saying that?
No, ma'am.
You got DK with a gun. Do you recall saying that?
No, ma'am.
And you got Thug with a gun. Do you remember telling him that?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember Detective Quinn or any other detective asking you in September 2013, Big Fred, what kind of gun did Big Fred have?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or another detective in September 2013, as it relates to September 11th, he had, that is Big Fred, he had the 9. He had a 9mm Ruger.
No, ma'am.
Do you own firearms, sir?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever owned firearms?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn or another detective on September 16, 2017, DK had a little bitty, small, little gray-looking gun?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall being asked what kind of gun did DK have?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying that you didn't know what kind, you just knew it was little bitty,
No, ma'am.
and that it was small and gray? Do you remember saying that?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember Detective Quinn asking you whether or not the gun was an automatic or something else?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that all the guns were automatic?
No, ma'am.
Do you know the difference between a pistol and a revolver?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall, let me ask you this, did you hang with DK Thug and Big Fred back in September of 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective, I don't hang with them?
No, ma'am.
Do you know how old Big Fred is?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall, or do you know how old Young Thug is?
No, ma'am.
Did you know how old he was or around the age he was on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying to a detective with APD, these are younger guys than me and Big Fred?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that y'all were trying to show your big homie a good time?
Ma'am, no, ma'am.
Do you recall telling him that you told Big Fred to buy him brand new clothes and stuff?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling a detective that you don't know what these young guys, what their intentions were, but they're way beyond what you and Big Fred were on?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying that the younger guys go by a whole other means of getting money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective at APD that you hustle to get your money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective at APD how it is that the younger guys liked to get their money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall a detective asking you in an interview at the Atlanta Police Department, what kind of gun did Young Thug have, if you could remember?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling anyone that you didn't see Young Thug's gun?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall being asked, well, if you didn't see it, how'd you know he had one when he got in the car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that you knew that he had a gun because he kept one on him?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall discussing or telling the detective how much you were supposed to pay for the lead?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that you all were going to split the pot?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that it was supposed to be $150 for the lien?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying that it was supposed to be you paid 50, Thug paid 50, and DK pays 50?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall saying that you all were going to go in on the lien to show Big Fred a good time?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that in September 2013, by September, you had only known DK for a few weeks?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that on September the 11th, 2013, that was only the second time that you had gotten into the car with DK?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall describing for Detective Quinn on September 16, 2017, the tattoo that DK had on his face?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn he just got a tattoo? He got a tattoo, the D and a backwards K on his forehead. Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you what that's all about, that backward K?
No, ma'am.
And do you recall telling Detective Quinn? I don't know.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you were just a family man who had just got home? You were just a family man.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you about DK and who he was friends with in the car, who he's tight with in the car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that DK was tight with Thug, Young Thug?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that DK and Thug is there an objection, Your Honor?
I don't know. I was listening to the, yes, you may, sir. Come on up.
Mr. Bean, do you recall telling the detective with the Atlanta Police Department in September of 2013 that DK and Thug are down with each other?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that DK and Thug are gangbangers and that they call themselves some type of blood?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective asking you how long you've known Thug?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that you've known Thug's dad for over a couple of years?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that Thug just started coming around and hanging?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective asking you how long you've known Thug to exist as a human being?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective he's a rapper since I came from nothing?
No, ma'am.
You said you know Young Thug by his music. Is that right?
I know, yes, music.
And have you heard nothing about I Came From Nothing as it relates to his music?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that they call Young Thug Little Jeff?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that his daddy's name is Jethro, that the dad is Jethro and Thug is Little Jeff?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective saying, okay, I'll figure it out before we leave?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling him it's not hard to find?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective asking you whether if you saw a picture of the kid DK again, would you recognize him? Do you recall the detective asking you that?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective telling you that he had with him a picture of a kid named DK with a backwards K in the middle of his forehead? Do you recall the detective telling you that?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective showing you a picture and asking you, is that the DK that got in the car?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, confrontation clause.
Effect on the listener.
Overruled.
Do you recall the detective asking you, is that the DK that got in your car while showing you a picture of a person?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that that in fact was the DK that
No,
got in
ma'am.
the car?
No, ma'am.
And do you recall telling the detective that he got in the back seat?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective asking you whether DK had a lot of money on him or asking about money that DK may have had on him on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that on September 11, 2013, as you were going up and down, you heard a couple of shots?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that you all went off the wall, over the wall?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall being asked by the detective, how did it happen that you all went over that wall?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that the car just went out of control and wouldn't bring itself, it wouldn't brake?
No, ma'am.
And do you recall telling the detective that after the gate hit, the car just went?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that the car went over that grass and did its own thing?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that it went straight to that wall? No steering, no acceleration, none of that. It was just gone.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that you did not mash the gas? It was just the car did its own thing.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall speaking to the detective about a probation violation that you had?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective that you didn't get a bond after you were arrested on September 11th, 2013 because of that probation violation?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember the detective asking or actually playing for you a recording of a woman who was talking about having just gotten a gun?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember telling the detective that that was your wife on the recording?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective playing more than one recording for you?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall the detective telling you that he needed to know about whether or not the officer's shooting was justified? Do you remember telling the detective that?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn or any other detective playing you a recording about the events of September 11th, 2013, of yourself and someone else discussing that?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling the detective a second time that all that shit happened so fast?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you told DK and Thug to go ahead and go to the store, and that they went to the store and came back talking about a lick around the corner?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that they came back and said, in your words, that nigga named goddamn Red got the money?
No, ma'am.
Do you know a person named Red or who went by the name Dirty Red on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you were just like, F this, I'm just to get in the car and drive. That's it. That's the only time I drove all them because I ain't go nowhere.
No, ma'am.
Do you remember talking to Detective Quinn about a person named Buck Buck?
No, ma'am.
Do you know a person named Buck Buck?
No, ma'am.
Are you familiar with a person named Buck Buck?
No, ma'am.
Are you aware of anyone who goes by the name Buck Buck?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn playing you at least 3 calls that you made to your wife while you were inside the Fulton County Jail?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you about a statement you made that one of the niggas in the back shot by accident, probably?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that it was probably Big Fred that got shot by someone inside the car you were driving on September 11, 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you heard like 2 shots while you were inside the car after it had lost control?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Do you recall telling Detective Quinn you did not want to go into court and testify about the things you were saying to him in that interview?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall at any time feeling back in 2013 that you did not want to go into court and tell anybody what you had just told Detective Quinn?
No, ma'am.
Do you know how Thug wore his hair back in September of 2013?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you whether the lien deal was on hold, but the robbery wasn't dead because DK got the money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall asking Detective Quinn, DK took some money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall talking to Detective Quinn about Club Lacura?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you about following Dirty Red?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, fuck the lean bullshit I told you first, man?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, I ain't gonna play the lingo with you. The nigga that they told about Lacura or whatever, we followed them to Summerdale.
I don't recall.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, who told you? I want to know who.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall responding or telling Detective Quinn, okay, listen, Thug wanted to see the lick?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, you see what I'm saying, he come get us, tell us the boy sitting up there in Kenny's shop with $10,000, $15,000 on it, and that he had just seen the money in a bag?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that Kenny hopped up and got the money already and it was gone by the time you all got there?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn there was no such thing as $10,000 or $15,000 up there, no more in the car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, okay, you were excited about hearing that number, what happens next?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, okay, cool, we go check it out. Let's look at it and see what's going on. Boom.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, they ain't up there? They come back flying past Macon Drive and we see them.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, we following them up there and we asked some of them? Do you recall telling that to Detective Quinn?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that y'all were following a gray car that you believed was a Pontiac or a little gray Dodge?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you all were in Summerdale when you all got ready and DK jumped out of the car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, why'd y'all pick Dirty Red? Of all people, why did you pick Dirty Red?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, I don't know why Thug didn't get out. It was his lick.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that that this was Thug's man? So it ain't no who picked who.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that DK was Thug's foot soldier?
No, ma'am.
Do you know what a foot soldier is?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that Thug tells his foot soldier what to do?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you yourself are no gangbanger?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you are no blood or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that Thug said, go get it? Hey, you go get it to DK.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, exactly what did Thug say?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, he told him, go get the money. He said, go. That's what he told him. Go take the money and come back. Do you recall?
Your Honor, compensation clause.
Ma'am.
Your Honor, again, the witness is on the stand. The defendant is the person, Defendant Williams is the person who is alleged to have made this statement.
Okay,
That
I
is-
got it. I got it. I'm gonna overrule your objection.
Do you recall that Detective Quinn asked you a question after you said, go take the money, after you said that Thug told DK to go take the money and come on back?
Your Honor, may I have a continuing objection?
You certainly may, yes, sir.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you whether Thug said that before or after you backed into the parking lot?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you backed in and then Thug told him to go get the money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, where's the Taurus that you were worried about?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, is the Taurus in front of you or behind you?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, the Taurus is in front, the police Taurus is in front of me?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, did you know that it was the police?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, I didn't know it was the police?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you were like, hold on, let me see, I see a Taurus?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you wanted to make sure that it was a Taurus?
No, ma'am.
So, do you recall telling Detective Quinn, so the cop in the Taurus is going on in, and boom, we back in?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that DK goes and gets the money, and he gets out, boom, 2 minutes later, he's popping shots?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that DK didn't even have time to take any money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you, did you see who DK was shooting at?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that DK didn't have time to take money because he was shooting?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you if you saw all the money on the ground when you were in the back of the police car?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that you didn't see any money on the ground? You didn't even know that DK had taken money?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that after the car crashed, that one guy ran this way, another ran that way, another ran that way, and that everybody go run their own separate ways?
No,
Recall telling him that?
no, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you about a statement you said to your wife, I wish I would have run with Thug because he got away?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember asking, or Detective Quinn asking you, which way did Thug go?
No, ma'am.
Do you remember telling Detective Quinn, me and Thug got out of the car, we jumped. We were freaking though, we were freaking out. DK couldn't move against him apparently because he was shot or whatever. Thug jumped the wall, I jumped the wall, I jumped up here, thug went behind the Dollar King. Do you recall telling that to Detective Quinn?
I don't recall.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn, I jumped over in the parking lot, and as I'm running across the parking lot, that's when the police car come and run me over or whatever?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Quinn asking you what kind of car ran you over?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that the blue Taurus ran you over?
No, ma'am.
And do you recall telling Detective Quinn that it was the same blue Taurus that you had seen in Summerdale?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Detective Quinn that it was the females in the blue Taurus?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Love?
Yes. Mr. Bean, for the court's instructions, I'm gonna.
Yeah, Mr. Bean, at this point in time, we're going to stop your examination as we've come to a point in the afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, this is our natural stopping point for today. So what I'd like to do is to go ahead and recess you. Mr. Bean, I'll need you to come back in the morning for 9 o'clock, okay? And then you'll resume your testimony at that point in time, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, sir. Please don't discuss your testimony to anybody except the attorneys in this case. Have a good evening, okay?
All right.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. So tomorrow we will reconvene. As I mentioned, if y'all could be here by 9 o'clock for an anticipated 9:30 start time, we will work till probably around the noontime hour or shortly thereafter, and then I'll recess you for the evening. As just a kind of preview for next week, remember, we'll come in probably around 10:30 on Monday, and we'll start at 11, and then we'll be on administrative days from the 5th through the 12th, okay? And we'll come back on that following Wednesday. So if you've got anything you need to plan or anything such as that, that'll give you some sufficient time as we take up some other issues, okay? All right, what are your questions of me, administrative in nature? Anyone? All right, let's go through your admonitions, all right? Leave your notepads in the basket. Please don't discuss anything amongst yourselves in regards to what you learned in here. As you're not started, you cannot begin the deliberative process until I tell you to do so when the case is concluded. Remember, it would be a violation for you to let anybody try and discuss this case or approach you about this case in any way. If that were the case, you need to let Sergeant Ingram and myself know immediately. Please resist temptation of listening to any accounts on the news media or any other third parties or any or third-party websites. And please also resist temptation of doing any extra research, going by any scenes that have been depicted, or phoning a friend or anybody else. Because remember, I told you can only consider what's presented in the four walls of this courtroom. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your continued and